What you do in the first 60 seconds after you open your eyes each morning may matter more to how long you live than anything you eat, any pill you take, or any workout you do all day. I know that sounds dramatic, but stay with me, because after this video, you may never get out of bed the same way again. In the next few minutes, I'll walk you through exactly what to do in that first minute, and why I've watched this one tiny habit separate patients who age well from patients who end up in my operating room. But first, a question. Tell me in the comments, do you jump straight out of bed the second your alarm goes off, or do you take your time? I have a feeling I already know the answer for most of you watching this. I've spent more than 2 decades in cardiac surgery, and there's a pattern I've noticed that almost nobody talks about. It has nothing to do with diet, nothing to do with exercise, and nothing to do with medication, at least not directly. It's the 60 seconds between the moment my patients wake up and the moment their feet hit the floor, a window most people never think about twice. I didn't notice it either, not for years, until the same story kept showing up in my consultation room with slightly different names attached to it. A patient of mine, a retired postal worker, came into my clinic after a fall in his bathroom at 6:15 in the morning. He hadn't tripped on a rug, he hadn't missed a step. He'd simply stood up too fast, and for about 4 seconds, his brain didn't get the blood it needed. That's all it took. He walked away that time with a bruised hip, a cut above his eyebrow, and a badly shaken sense of confidence that lasted far longer than the bruise did. Plenty of people, as you'll see in a moment, aren't that fortunate, and the difference between his outcome and theirs often comes down to nothing more than luck and timing. Here's what almost nobody realizes about waking up. Your body doesn't simply switch on like a light. Overnight, while you're lying flat and still for 6, 7, 8 hours, your entire cardiovascular system settles into a completely different operating mode than the one it needs the second you stand up. Think of it as a machine that's been idling all night. It needs a moment to warm back up before it can handle full demand. Researchers call part of this the cortisol awakening response, and in a healthy body, it's a normal, even necessary surge that jumpstarts your system for the day. But paired with the sudden physical transition from lying flat to standing upright, that hormonal spike collides with a cardiovascular system that hasn't caught up yet. The two events, hormonal and physical, are supposed to be gentle and gradual. Most mornings we force them to happen all at once. Studies have consistently found that heart attacks and strokes cluster more heavily in the first few hours after waking than at almost any other point in the day, a pattern doctors have documented for decades without most patients ever hearing about it. It's worth asking why, if this is so well documented, almost nobody has told you about it. Most fall prevention advice focuses on removing loose rugs, adding grab bars, and improving lighting. All genuinely useful, all aimed at the environment around you. Almost none of it addresses the 60 seconds before your feet ever reach that environment, the actual moment where the trouble often begins. We've spent decades fall-proofing bathrooms while almost entirely ignoring the transition that puts people at risk of needing one in the first place. So let's break this down into exactly what's happening inside your body in that first minute, because once you understand it, the habit itself will make perfect sense. 5 things happen in that window. 2, you've probably felt yourself. 1, you've probably never been told, and the last one is the reason I insist every single patient over 60 take this seriously, even the ones who think they're perfectly healthy and have never had a single cardiac symptom in their life. The first thing happening is something almost nobody thinks about: gravity. While you're lying down, blood distributes fairly evenly throughout your body, with your heart, lungs, and brain all sitting at roughly the same level. The moment you stand, gravity pulls a significant volume of that blood straight down into your legs, sometimes close to a pint in the span of just a few seconds. In a younger body, this isn't much of a problem. Veins constrict quickly, and the muscles in your calves contract to help pump blood back up toward your heart, a mechanism doctors sometimes call the second heart. It works quietly in the background every time you walk, climb stairs, or simply shift your weight from foot to foot throughout the day. After 60, those veins have often lost some of their elasticity, and the valves inside them work less efficiently at preventing backward flow. The pump is still there, it's just slower to respond. And a slower pump means blood has more time to settle exactly where you don't want it settling, away from the organs that need it most. Have you ever stood up and felt that strange, heavy, sluggish sensation in your legs before your head even catches up? That's exactly what we're talking about, and it's more common than most people admit, even to their own doctor, because it usually resolves within a few seconds and gets written off as nothing. The second thing builds directly on the first, and this is the one nearly everyone has experienced without knowing its actual name. When blood pools in your legs faster than your body can compensate, your blood pressure drops for a few seconds, a condition called orthostatic hypotension. Your body is supposed to correct this almost instantly through a reflex involving pressure sensors in your blood vessels called baroreceptors. But baroreceptor sensitivity declines with age, meaning the correction takes longer, and that gap is exactly when people feel dizzy, lightheaded, or briefly unsteady. Research suggests orthostatic hypotension affects roughly 1 in 5 adults over 65, and it's associated with a meaningfully higher risk of falls, fainting, and in some cases, unexplained trips to the emergency room that never get properly traced back to their actual cause. It's worth noting that several common medications make this worse, particularly blood pressure medications, certain antidepressants, and some diuretics. If you're on any of these and you've noticed morning dizziness, that's not a coincidence you should ignore, and it's worth a conversation with your doctor about timing and dosage rather than simply pushing through it. Certain conditions raise this risk further as well. Diabetes, Parkinson's disease, and general dehydration can all blunt the reflexes your body relies on to correct blood pressure quickly. None of that means this habit won't help you. If anything, it means the 60 seconds matters even more for exactly the people most likely to skip it. Have you ever had to grab onto something, a nightstand, a door frame, a wall, just to steady yourself first thing in the morning? If so, your body has already been telling you exactly what we're discussing tonight, likely for years. That explains the dizziness, but it isn't even the part that concerns me most as a surgeon. The third thing catches almost everyone off guard because it doesn't feel like anything at all. That cortisol surge we mentioned earlier doesn't act alone. It arrives alongside a spike in adrenaline, which raises your heart rate and blood pressure sharply within minutes of waking, whether you notice it or not. Combine that internal spike with a sudden physical demand of sitting up and standing, and you're asking a cardiovascular system that's already working overtime to handle yet another abrupt change. It's a genuine stress test. For arteries that have grown stiffer over the decades, that combination of hormonal surge and physical exertion repeats itself every single morning of your life, year after year, mostly unnoticed until the day it isn't. This is your sympathetic nervous system, the body's fight or flight response, activating before you've even brushed your teeth. It's supposed to help you meet real demands throughout the day. It isn't designed to be triggered twice in the same 60 seconds, once by hormones and once by a sudden change in posture, before you've had a single sip of water. Reaching for coffee the moment you're upright doesn't help either. Caffeine itself raises blood pressure and heart rate, adding a third stimulant on top of cortisol and adrenaline before your system has had any chance to settle. None of this means give up your morning coffee. It simply means the order matters more than most people realize. Do you check your phone the instant you open your eyes, heart rate already climbing before your feet even leave the mattress? That habit alone can compound everything we just described, layering mental stress directly on top of a body that's already working overtime before you've even stood up. The fourth thing is rarely discussed outside of a hospital bed, which is exactly why most people have never heard of it. Lying still for 6 to 8 hours creates a period of prolonged immobility, and prolonged immobility is one of the recognized risk factors for blood clot formation, particularly in the deep veins of the legs, a condition doctors call deep vein thrombosis. You may have heard this referred to as economy class syndrome, the same phenomenon that makes long flights risky for blood clots. Your bed, physiologically speaking, isn't so different from that airplane seat. Hours of stillness, minimal muscle activity, and blood that has every opportunity to slow down exactly where you don't want it to. For most healthy adults, this risk stays low on any single morning. But if you have varicose veins, a history of clotting, certain medications, or limited mobility, that same overnight stillness becomes a meaningfully bigger concern, one that compounds night after night rather than resetting each time you wake up. Pay attention to your legs. If you've ever noticed unexplained swelling, warmth, or tenderness in one leg after a long period of inactivity, that's worth mentioning to your doctor directly, rather than assuming it will simply resolve on its own. The good news is that the exact same calf muscle action that helps with blood pooling also helps reduce this risk, which is part of why the habit I'm about to show you does double duty without adding a single extra second to your morning. 4 things down, and now here's the one that changes how seriously people take all of this. The 5th thing is falls, and specifically what happens after them. The dizziness we discussed earlier isn't just an uncomfortable sensation. It is by a wide margin one of the leading causes of falls in adults over 60. Those falls happen disproportionately in that first vulnerable minute after waking, often on the way to the bathroom, in low light, half awake, moving faster than the body is actually ready for. Here's the statistic that stops most of my patients cold. After a hip fracture in someone over 60, the risk of dying within the following year climbs as high as 1 in 4. Read that again, 1 in 4. That number is higher than the 1-year mortality rate for several common cancers. Almost nobody thinks of a hip fracture as something that dangerous. It doesn't sound like a cardiac event. It doesn't sound related to blood pressure or heart rhythm at all. But the chain of events that leads there almost always starts exactly where we've been focused this entire time, in that first unsteady minute after waking, when the body hasn't been given the time it needs to catch up with the demands being placed on it. There's a second, quieter danger here too. Many people who survive a hip fracture become afraid of falling again, and that fear leads them to move less, sit more, and gradually lose the strength and balance that protected them in the first place. The fracture itself is only the beginning of the story for a lot of my patients. What follows can shape the rest of their independence, sometimes permanently, in ways that have nothing to do with the original injury itself. Falls in older adults are, by most estimates, the leading cause of both fatal and non-fatal injury in this age group, and a striking proportion of them happen within the first hour of waking. That single hour, the one this entire video has been about, carries a disproportionate share of the risk for the whole day combined. If you or someone you love has ever had a scare, a stumble reaching for the nightstand, a moment of losing balance right after standing, this is precisely the moment we've been talking about this entire time. So let's bring all 5 of those threats together, because what I'm about to show you addresses every single one of them, and it takes exactly 60 seconds, no equipment, no getting up earlier, nothing to buy. Before you even open your eyes fully, spend the first 20 seconds moving your ankles. Flex your feet, point your toes, and roll your ankles in slow circles, first one direction, then the other. This engages that calf muscle pump we talked about, pushing blood back toward your heart and reducing both pooling and clot risk before you've even sat up. If your mobility is limited and full ankle circles are difficult, even gently flexing your feet back and forth a dozen times provides much of the same benefit. The next 20 seconds belong to your breath. Take 5 slow, deliberate breaths, in through your nose and out through your mouth, making the exhale a little longer than the inhale. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the body's built-in brake pedal, and helps blunt that sharp cortisol and adrenaline surge instead of letting it spike unchecked while you're still lying flat. Finally, use the last 20 seconds to sit up slowly and plant both feet flat on the floor. Stay seated at the edge of the bed for a few seconds before you stand, giving your blood pressure regulation system the extra time it needs after 60 to catch up with the change in position. Ankles, breath, sit. Then, and only then, stand up slowly. 60 seconds start to finish, and nothing about your morning routine actually needs to change beyond the order in which it happens. I know mornings are rushed, and I know the alarm going off already makes the day feel like it's ahead of you before you've even sat up. But 60 seconds is shorter than deciding what to wear, and it's time you're already spending lying there anyway before your feet ever touch the floor. You're not adding a task to your morning, you're simply changing the order of what's already happening in it. This habit also compounds over time in a way most people don't expect. Regularly and gently challenging your blood pressure regulation system, rather than shocking it every single morning, appears to help that system stay more responsive as you age, similar to how gentle, regular use keeps a joint or a muscle from stiffening up. Consistency, not intensity, is what makes the difference here. You're not training for anything dramatic. You're simply reminding your body every single morning how to make this transition the way it was designed to. What about weekends or mornings when you're traveling and your routine is already thrown off? The habit works exactly the same regardless of where you wake up or what time your alarm didn't go off. If anything, unfamiliar beds and disrupted sleep make this 60 seconds even more valuable, not less, since your body is already managing more change than usual. Let me speak to you honestly for a moment. Not as a content creator, but as a surgeon who has spent a career dealing with the aftermath of moments just like this one. Patients I've treated have had their entire life change because of 4 seconds of dizziness on an ordinary Tuesday morning. A broken hip, a head injury from hitting a bathroom counter on the way down, a hospital stay that turned into months of rehabilitation, and in some cases, a level of independence that never fully returned, even after the bone itself had technically healed. One woman I treated, a former nurse herself, told me afterward that she'd spent 30 years warning other people about exactly this and never once thought to apply it to her own mornings. She said the hardest part wasn't the surgery. It was accepting how ordinary the moment had been right before it happened. No warning, no dramatic symptom, just an ordinary Thursday, ended differently than every other Thursday before it. In almost every one of those cases, nothing was structurally wrong with their heart or their bones the day before it happened. What went wrong was the transition, the speed of going from lying flat to standing upright without giving their body the 60 seconds it needed to catch up. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would show up on a scan. Just an ordinary morning handled the exact same rushed way it had been handled for decades. These stories aren't rare exceptions. They're the quiet background pattern behind an enormous number of ordinary mornings that go badly. And in nearly every case, the damage happened not because someone did something reckless, but because they did something completely ordinary, the exact same way they've been doing it for years, without ever knowing their body's needs had changed underneath them. Here's a lesson more than 20 years in this field has taught me. The body doesn't ask for much as it ages. Mostly, it asks for a little more patience in the transitions, the moments between lying and sitting and standing, resting and moving. Give it that patience, and in return, it protects you in exactly the moments that matter most, the ones you'd otherwise never see coming. Now you know exactly what those 5 things are and exactly what to do about all of them, starting tomorrow morning. Not next week, not after you've researched it further, tomorrow. Let's bring this together into one simple plan. 5 things happen in your body in that first minute after waking. Blood pooling in your legs, a temporary drop in blood pressure, a surge of cortisol and adrenaline, an elevated risk of blood clots from overnight stillness, and, tying it all together, a meaningfully higher risk of a fall with real, sometimes life-changing consequences. One 60-second habit, broken into 3 20-second steps: ankle movement, slow breathing, and a seated pause before standing, addresses every one of them at once. If you already do something similar to this without ever having a name for it, taking your time in the morning, sitting on the edge of the bed for a moment before standing, you're already ahead of most people your age, and this video has simply given you the reasoning behind an instinct you already had. If you don't, tomorrow morning is an easy place to start, and it costs you nothing to try it once, and notice how different standing up actually feels. A question I get often is whether this only matters for people who've already had a fall or a dizzy spell. It doesn't. The whole point of this habit is prevention, not damage control. Waiting for a warning sign before you start protecting this transition means waiting for exactly the kind of event we've spent this entire video trying to help you avoid. You don't need a diagnosis to start tomorrow. You just need 60 seconds and a willingness to slow down for 1 minute of your day, even on the mornings that feel too busy to spare it. I'd like to ask you something directly, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. Which part of your current morning routine do you think puts you most at risk? Jumping up too fast, reaching for your phone before your feet even move, or skipping any kind of transition at all? I have a feeling a lot of you will recognize yourselves in at least one of these. If you found this video helpful, please share it. There is almost certainly someone in your life, a parent, a spouse, a friend over 60, who gets out of bed the exact same rushed way every single morning without ever thinking twice about it. Send this video to them tonight, before tomorrow morning arrives. Take care of yourself in that first minute of the day. It sets the tone, physically and otherwise, for every hour that follows it. And it costs you nothing but 60 seconds you were already going to spend lying there anyway. One final thought. Everything I've shared with you today is general medical information based on current research and my own clinical experience. It is not a substitute for personalized medical care. If you experience frequent dizziness upon standing, have a history of falls, or have a diagnosed cardiovascular condition, please talk with your own physician, since some causes of orthostatic symptoms require specific medical evaluation. That isn't just a disclaimer. It's sincere advice from someone who genuinely hopes you're still watching this channel and steady on your feet many years from now. Take care of yourself, and starting tomorrow morning, give your body the 60 seconds it's been asking you for all along.